Okay, welcome back everyone. So this will be my last video for you guys at SAA January 2013 intake. So the last thing I'd like to talk to you about is how to identify relevant courses. I think that's very important, and I would like to firstly tell you the two things which I'm going to explain in specific. The first one, relevant course. Okay, you can be sure that this thing will appear in some form or another during your exams. Second thing, so some key pointers when you come to approach appraisal questions, or what you call capital budgeting questions. Alright, so I'm going to first explain to you what's relevant course. Hope that builds a deeper impression onto you. Right, let's begin. Okay, now what actually is relevant course? Okay, note, relevant course is any course that will arise as a result of a decision being made. Now there are many examples of this. One example that I can think of offhand is, for instance, let's say you want to start the factory. What could be a relevant course when you decide to start the factory? So immediately examples of relevant course relating to starting a factory would be, for example, rental. Correct? You need to rent a place, and things such as wages, which you may have to pay. Alright, so this would be relevant. Now, however, when you start a factory, what wouldn't be relevant? For example, things such as head office courses allocated. Right. Now when you start a factory, it has nothing to do with your head office courses, whether you have more people at head office or not. Those courses shouldn't affect your decision to start the factory. So those courses relevant to starting the factory should only be limited only to rental, wages, and perhaps even materials. Right, it cannot be anything like this, and even depreciation. Okay, these are strictly not relevant courses. Okay, these few that you can see: head office courses allocated and depreciation, for example. Now, in your past exams, they are given other examples. Okay, another example being given was actually the case of a business making drugs, and they were looking to outsource their packaging. Now those who have been very hardworking and went on to practice this, you will surely remember that this question was actually painless, which was a past FIA FFM exam question. Okay, I'm not going to go through review the whole question, but just to highlight to you what are the relevant courses if you are given such a case. Now, relevant courses, when you talk about outsourcing of like the packaging of drugs, would be, for example, savings. If you outsource your packaging to another company, then you have savings. What kind of savings would that be? Savings in terms of raw materials, savings in terms of labor costs, because you no longer need to employ those people who used to do the packaging. Okay, and these two will form positive cash flows in your MPV calculation, right? However, those things not relevant, if you can recall the question of painless, would be like your committed courses. Now in the case of painless, the cost that was committed was actually the lease premises? Because in the question they mentioned that they have actually signed a lease for these premises, and this lease was non-cancelable. Meaning to say that if you choose not to continue with the lease next year, you can't cancel. There is no option 2. Now for such a case, the future rentals that you have to pay under this lease would be not a relevant cost. Got it? Okay? Now even though you might say that, hey, the rental might be payable only next year, the year after next, and so on, but so long as you have signed a lease that is non-cancelable, such rentals would not be a relevant cost. Got it? Okay, good. Now I'm going to touch on next thing, that is another example, also from the past year question, that is an investment on new equipment. Now the case of this which has this was the clear company question from the past year FIA FFM exams. Okay, so if you choose to invest in new equipment, so potential relevant costs would be like, of course, the cost of the new equipment. Alright. Now, and any additional costs that you incur in running the machine, in maintaining the machine, and so on. Okay, so note, what do I mean by this? If previously you have been spending $1,000 on the maintenance, the running of the old machine, but let's say after having this new machine, you have to incur total cost of $1,600 on all your running costs and maintenance costs. Your relevant cost would only be $600. Right? So meaning to say that relevant costs can only include incremental costs. Okay, that's very important. Got it? Now, so I have actually touched on a few very key examples. Now, I'm going to summarize what is relevant cost. Okay, so as mentioned to you before, relevant costs would be any cost that would arise as a result of a decision being made. Now, it has to be costs that are avoidable. It has to be costs that will occur in the future. It has to be costs that are incremental. Right? Very important. Now, the relevant costs cannot include sunk costs. That means costs that have already been incurred are not relevant, including historical costs. That means if you incurred any costs on, for example, research, study, survey, those would be historical costs, and they will not be part of your relevant costs. Got it? Okay. Now note, I'd like to also mention that in the past year exams, there were cases where the examiner have ever asked what is relevant cost. So please make sure that you know how to explain this. Very important. Okay. So I have more or less come to the end, but before I really touch the end, is that I'm going to also explain to you the MCQ question where they have tested on relevant costs. Now, time is very short. I'm not going to go through with you a long story about how to determine relevant costs, what is relevant cost and what is not. Okay, there are not many examples that I can give you now. I'd like to quote a few key things about this. Now, I'm sure you have remembered that there were some MCQs you came across, and they stated that the business has some existing materials which had cost the business $500 initially. And the question further mentions to you that the replacement cost, okay, of this materials, that is, once you finish using, you have to actually purchase new ones. The replacement cost would be $600. Now, if you look at this very simple example, which cost would you use to charge your customer? If your customer comes in and tells you that you need to start to help him with this certain, let's say, project A, which cost would you use as your basis to charge the customer? Now, the answer is very simple. It's $600. Why? Because $500 has already been incurred. It is a past cost. Remember, relevant cost, it has to be something that happens in the future. And $500 was something that was spent in the past. So this $500 cannot be a relevant cost. Got it? Now, let's say what happens if I extend the question a bit more and I explain to you that, however, there is one more thing. These materials have a realizable value of maybe say 800. Okay, which means that if I choose not to, for example, use these materials for project A, I have an opportunity to sell these materials for $800. Now, let me ask you again. Do you think that this $500 is still a cost that is not relevant to your decision making? It is still not relevant because it has already been spent. So in this case, if you have these two figures, one is the replacement cost and the other the realizable value, which one should you use as your basis to charge the customer for project A? 600 or 800? Your answer is 800. You choose simply the higher of replacement cost or realizable value. Okay? So in this case, based on 800, you charge the customer, maybe 800 plus a certain percentage of markup for that project A. Okay, let me reverse this a bit and make this into another example. Say perhaps now you found out that the realizable value of this materials is 400. In this case, what would you choose as your basis to charge customer for project A? 600. Remember, the rule is higher of. And you remember still, the 500 is not relevant at all. Okay? So 600 is still the relevant cost to charge the customer for project A. Okay? Got it? Now, I'm going to come to my last example. Okay, very quick example. Now, there are many possibilities where the examiner may test you on relevant costs. So, quite impossible for you to be prepared for all kinds of situations. But main thing is that, remember, the key is relevant costs are any costs that you incur in the future. Okay, they must be avoidable. So, let us look at one last example, then all the best for exams. Let's say you have some materials at hand, and this existing materials cost you 600 last time. Okay, and this is in hand. I must specifically highlight to you, these are materials in hand, $600. Okay, now, so right now, you found that these materials, to replace them, the replacement cost would be 300. Now my question here is, what if I add one more thing here and tell you that these materials have no other use? Okay, no other use. That means you will not need these materials for any other thing. Okay, however, now I'm going to add one more thing for you. Let's say now the situation is a bit different. That is, I'm going to tell you that the net realizable value, or you can say realizable value, is now, for example, 400. Okay, so now you have this customer came to you and asked you to help him perform this project B. In this case, note, I specifically mentioned that there is no other use for this material. Okay? So, do you think you want to replace these materials once you use them up? No, you probably will not. Right? So, replacement cost is not relevant. Because if you don't use it for anything, you probably will not go out and buy new ones. Okay? And would this 600 be relevant? It wouldn't be, because this has already been spent. Remember, relevant cost is anything that will be incurred in the future. So in this case, you're left with only one figure, 400. That 400 would be the relevant cost that you use as the basis to charge your customer. So this is a relevant cost. Alright? So I hope that this gives you some insight into how to manage the MCQ portion of relevant costs. But again, if you want a quick summary on this, don't worry. I have in fact earlier on provided for you a printout of a chart on relevant costs. Do you remember that flowchart? Please refer to that. Okay, that basically sums up what I'm trying to explain here. Very important. Okay? So, I wish everyone all the best, and that if you do come across anything that you think that you can't manage, don't worry. Do something. Don't leave anything blank. Right? Golden rule, even if you do not know, please at least fill out something. Your time for the exam is extremely limited, so make sure that you spend not more than 15 minutes for the MCQ. Okay, do your best at it. And ensure that you spend approximately 1.5 hours for your section B questions. Okay, which means that in section B you have very limited time. For each question you have maybe about 12 minutes per question. Maybe to the maximum of perhaps 15 minutes. You don't really have a lot of time. Alright? So I hope that you end up not doing well because you overspend time. Right? And this is my last advice to you. I hope that you all do well. And if anything, please do give me a call, drop me a message. I'll be available. I'll do what I can to help you out if you still need any more help. Okay? All the best. Take care.